Welcome to INOvators, a series where we sit down with thought leaders across the healthcare space to discuss some of the industry's most pressing topics. Joining me today is Todd Crosslin, Global Industry Principal at Snowflake, to talk about how AI is changing the way work gets done in healthcare to ultimately help organizations make faster and smarter decisions. Thanks for joining us today, Todd.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for Inovalon to have me on.
Of course. So healthcare organizations have long been rich in data, but sometimes slow to make it actionable. Tell me a little bit about how AI is changing that.
Yeah, I think recently I've had a lot of conversations with customers, and I've kind of encouraged them to take I call it the walking and chewing gum approach. There are so many data quality issues in healthcare that basically it's very difficult to take action to use AI technology on certain amounts of data because, quite frankly, the quality is not there. So garbage in, garbage out. So there's a walking aspect, and you can use AI in that data engineering process, which will improve the quality of the data. And then, yes, you ultimately walk to the result of using AI on the data for, let's say, a operational or clinical use case. However, at the same time, I tell people you can chew gum because, quite frankly, there is data that is good enough, right, to glean an insight that, quite frankly, was not possible before we had AI. So there's a lot of use cases around grabbing unstructured data, blending it with structured data, using things like Snowflake Cortex that allows you to get quick insights. Now, those aren't insights that we'd put into the hands of a patient or maybe an end user in an application, but for a high-level analyst, a subject matter expert, you want to unleash the power of AI, and that gives you that ability to do that. So it's very limited, right? Trusted people, but then they're now using those AI tools, and you're not waiting around for what could be perfect.
I love the walk and chew gum reference. It's one I use often. But you've mentioned enabling analysts to build their own AI agents or models. Why is that such a powerful shift, and what do you think is driving that shift?
Yeah, I think, quite frankly, it's the demand. It's the fact that we're all able to use tools in our personal lives and abilities. I mean, in healthcare, we're all out there asking about our symptoms, right? We might as well, embrace the fact that our patients are being enabled by AI, and we all have our opinions about that. But in the end, we as a technology company said we must democratize. We must make these tools accessible for our subject matter experts like myself. I'm a data geek. I'm not an engineer. But it's been awesome to be able to go in and say, I can define, right, what are the facts and dimensions and the metrics and the relationships between the data, especially pharmacy data, which is my background. I'm able to go in and say, yes, this metric of margin equals this, and this is what medication possession ratios are. I know those. Don't ask me to write a 50-line SQL statement on it, but I can certainly put together and define those semantics and then bring that together. And I'm able to do that in a graphical interface that allows me to make the AI aware of those things. And then it's all a question of then starting to ask questions. And again, because our subject matter experts, it's not about the first question you ask, right? It's going through and then you get to that fifth question, that conversation with the AI that unlocks an insight that it would have taken potentially weeks, if not months, to work with your engineering teams to build a model, to do whatever. Now you can do that yourself.
And AI development has traditionally sat with, IT or the data science teams. How is the decentralization changing the speed, ownership, and innovation that AI is bringing?
And it's kind of one of those dual tracks again. And I'm always super careful to recognize our data scientists and our data engineers. We also provide them the tools to accelerate. They get to use AI in their data engineering workflows. So it's not that we're not discarding them, right? I mean, we don't have our models without our data scientists. We don't have all of those fundamental tools. But what's been amazing to watch is the folks that are building these agents on their own, and now they're able to go out and to answer questions. What they're also doing is those end up being the MVPs, the minimum viable products, which then the full engineering teams come behind and say, okay, we want to put this in front of our customers, but now what do we need? We need guardrails, right? We need to make sure that a customer in the field doesn't tell the AI, hey, go change that data for me. Ooh, that's bad, right? We don't want that to happen. We want it to be done properly and with the proper protections and have the guardrails in place. So it's what's beautiful about it, and what I see happening is that data engineers are getting a lot closer to the business or the clinical team, right? And now they're collaborating a lot closer than in prior years, right? It's kind of throw something over the wall. Here's my requirements. Go build it. They come back in 6 months. You love it. You hate it. Right now, that iteration is happening much, much quicker because the tools are basically built that way.
Right. And, with this kind of greater empowerment is greater responsibility. So
Absolutely.
How can organizations ensure that the analysts who are building these models, that they're accurate, ethical, they're compliant?
Right. Yep. No, and this is I hate to say it, it's the unsexy part of this world, right? It is the fact that we have to have the right people to come in there and sit alongside, right, and say, okay, you're using this internally, that's okay, that's safe, right? But it's a whole level, it's a whole nother bar that has to be achieved out there. There are organizations that are talking around the ethical use of AI and all of that, and that's a very much an evolutionary space right now as well. But the key is to be connected with your compliance team, to be connected with your legal team, is that you must go through those things, because in the end, what you don't want is to have something get out in the wild and then it comes back to bite you in one way or the other. But that's where, again, I go back to the walking and chewing gum, right? The chewing gum stuff, a little more relaxed, right? But when you're going to get out there, right, you can't run, right? If you run into that, you're going to run into problems, right? You need to be really diligent about spending the time to do the testing, but then also recognizing that this world, I was having this conversation the other day, this world is a subjective world. It's not necessarily an objective world. And so if you go into it with that mentality, is that if you set the expectations that AI is going to give you a direction versus maybe not an exact answer, then if you set that expectation, right, and you make sure it's not trying to give a point, a 3 decimal place answer, shall we say, but it's there to say something is moving in this direction or that direction, now you have a little more grace, right? There's a little more broad applicability than saying, I need the exact answer. And so just recognizing what you're using it for is important.
Can you share some examples of analysts or healthcare teams who've used AI to make tangible improvements, whether that's operational, clinical, or maybe financial?
Yeah, I think there's several. I think clinically, ambient scribes are kind of all the rage, right, across healthcare today. And we have, some customers that are building those ambient scribes natively in Snowflake. What makes that kind of differentiated is the fact that because that client's not only EHR data, but their imaging data, their pathology reports, diagnostic data, all that other data is already in Snowflake. So it's really interesting to watch an ambient scribe at work, in this case in emergency departments up in Canada. It's a phenomenal use case to take the power of speech to text, right? Text to summary, summary to extraction, right? And seeing all these different AI components and different models working together in order to, in their case, they had I think it's a 13% increase in visits in the emergency rooms across the province. Phenomenal, right? Actually able to measure it, right? So we actually had a measurable improvement from AI. I would like to think that it's too early to have a clinical measurement of improvement, but it's going to be there's going to be, because of the fact that AI grabbed the full text, the full voice. You have the full voice, the full text, a summary of all the text, right? All of that is now part of the electronic healthcare record and available for future, right, insights and interrogation by an AI model. So that right there, I think anecdotally leads to probably a better clinical outcome as well. In another area, I would say operationally, if you look at the amount of contracts and the amount of documents that are involved in the back office process of healthcare, the minute that a claim is created, the endless amount of prior authorizations and denials and approvals. So that it's kind of an operational and financial use case, right? Is operationally, if you can speed the appeals process from 2 weeks to 2 days, boom, right? You've got an operational impact. If through that appeals process you had a 50% approval of appeals before, But because AI was able to gather better documentation, I went to an 80, 85, 90% approval of appeals. Now I have both an operational and obviously a very significant financial impact as well. So I think those are two examples.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are great. As AI becomes more intuitive and self-service, what do you think the next generation of analysts is going to look like?
Well, it's very interesting. I would say that the speed to moving from an operator to an analyst to a subject matter expert becomes condensed. And what I mean by that, I was recently asked to give my opinion on the pharmacy benefit scheme of Australia. It is similar to the pharmacy benefit management of the United States, but it's different. And so while I do have a pharmacy background, it probably in prior to AI, that probably would have taken me several weeks, talk to people, do my research and what have you. What did I do? I went into Snowflake. I grabbed all this public pharmacy data, the whole pharmacy benefit scheme of Australia. I loaded all of that because it's a socialized system, right? All that data is available publicly. I loaded all that structured data into Snowflake, and I started doing what? Asking it questions. So after several hours of just interacting with that data, I moved from a United States pharmacy subject matter expert to, I'm not saying I'm an expert, but talk about accelerating my ability to translate that expertise into Australian expertise is something that took hours, where I felt very comfortable entering that conversation with a pharmacy group in Australia. And oh, by the way, after I showed them the Snowflake intelligence agent of what I used, I said, so now imagine that you added your proprietary data to that same agent, and now you get to ask it questions about your own data in relation to the government expenditure data of Australia. So they got it. Very, very smart CTO, and he definitely loved that. Right, he loved that ability to be able to blend that data together very, very quickly with agentic AI. So I think, to me, it's about speed. This is about speed to subject matter expertise. And so, again, at a brand new dietitian like my 23-year-old daughter, her move from being a dietitian coming out of school and being registered, I think she will move and become a much better dietitian faster because she has access to those AI tools.
That is awesome. Two very cool examples. So if you were to be advising a healthcare leader today, how would you tell them to start enabling this kind of empowerment across their teams?
I think number one is courage. Number one, like you can't just sit back and hope that someone else is going to do it for you. You can't sit back and just, like, oh, it's not, it doesn't give the perfect answer every time. The time for excuses, I would say, is over. So number one, courage. Just get in there. And thankfully, platforms like Snowflake allow you to experiment at scale. So, and I would go so far as to say, you don't have to stop at experimentation. If we had this conversation last year, right, during Empower, I would say experimentation, right, go out there, maybe do a few MVPs. Fast forward to now, that experimentation should be used for a minimum viable product, which then can be rolled out to a full production capability. And I think that's kind of the key now, is that you can do these things in a very quick way, and they're valuable, right? There's tangible benefits, like I discussed earlier, that you're seeing real operational, real financial, and what I believe will be real clinical impact.
Absolutely. I mean, even a year ago, I was talking to some of your colleagues at Empower, and the way the conversation has advanced in just a relatively short amount of time is very impressive. So
absolutely.
Todd, thank you so much for sitting down with us today. It's been a great conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And to our audience, thanks for watching. Be sure to keep an eye out for our next episode of INOvators.